Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Liza English Podcast.
Hey, everyone. It's great to have you here.
I'm your host, Liza, and I'm here with my co-host, Chris.
Thanks for joining us today.
Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode.
And if you enjoyed today's conversation, give the video a like and share it with another English learner.
All right, let's jump into today's topic.
This is a topic that I think almost every English learner can relate to.
Definitely. Today we're talking about how to think in English naturally. And I think this is something many learners struggle with because they don't actually think in English. They think in their native language first and then translate everything into English.
That's true. And honestly, I think most learners don't even realize they're doing it. It's such a normal habit that it feels automatic.
Exactly. Someone asks a simple question in English, and instead of responding immediately, the learner translates the question, thinks of an answer, and then translates the answer back into English.
Which is a lot of work for the brain.
It really is. Imagine doing that for every sentence in a conversation. No wonder speaking can feel slow and exhausting.
I remember talking to a learner who said, "I know what I want to say, but it takes too long to say it." And I think translating is often the reason.
That's a great point. The problem isn't always vocabulary or grammar. Sometimes the learner already knows the words. The real problem is that they're taking an extra step before speaking.
Exactly. It's like taking a longer route to a destination when there's already a direct road available.
I like that comparison. And the interesting thing is that children don't learn languages by translating.
That's true. When children learn their first language, they connect words directly to ideas, objects, and experiences.
Right. When a child hears the word apple, they don't translate it. They simply think of the fruit.
But many adult learners hear an English word and immediately search for the equivalent word in their own language.
And that habit can slow down conversations.
Definitely. Especially when someone is nervous, because now they're translating and worrying at the same time.
That's a difficult combination.
It is. And I think that's why learners sometimes feel that their speaking ability is much weaker than their listening ability.
That's true. Many learners can understand English quite well. They can watch videos, listen to podcasts, and read articles. But speaking feels harder because speaking requires instant responses.
You don't have time to translate every sentence during a real conversation.
Exactly. And that's why learning to think directly in English can make such a big difference.
The good news is that it's a skill anyone can develop.
Absolutely. You don't need to move to another country. You don't need perfect grammar, and you certainly don't need to be fluent already.
You simply need to start building the habit little by little.
And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today.
Because thinking in English is not magic.
It's a skill.
And like any skill, it can be practiced.
So in the next part, let's talk about one of the biggest misconceptions learners have. The idea that translating is always bad. That's a great place to start. So let's start with a question. Is translating always a bad thing?
That's interesting, because I think many learners believe it is. They hear people say, "Don't translate. Think only in English." And then they feel guilty every time they translate something.
I agree. But honestly, I don't think translating is the enemy.
Neither do I. In fact, when you're learning a new language, translating can be very useful. It's often how we understand new words and new ideas in the beginning.
Exactly. If you're a beginner and you learn a new word like umbrella, or airport, it's completely normal to connect that word to your native language first.
That's how many people start learning.
The problem isn't translating occasionally. The problem is depending on translation for every single sentence.
That's a huge difference.
Think about it this way. If you're using translation as a learning tool, that's helpful. But if you're using translation as a crutch during every conversation, it can slow you down.
I like that explanation because it makes the goal much clearer. We're not trying to eliminate translation overnight. We're trying to reduce it over time.
Exactly. And I think that's where many learners become frustrated. They expect themselves to suddenly stop translating completely.
Which is unrealistic. Habits take time to change.
Absolutely. If you've been translating in your head for years, your brain won't suddenly change after one day of practice.
That would be nice, though.
It certainly would.
I think another misconception is that fluent speakers never translate.
That's true. People imagine that fluent speakers think in English 100% of the time.
But that's not always the case.
Not at all. Even advanced learners sometimes translate difficult ideas, technical vocabulary, or unfamiliar expressions.
The difference is that they don't translate everything. They think directly in English most of the time.
Exactly. And that's really the goal. Not perfection, just improvement.
I think that's an important message for our listeners, because language learning is full of small improvements.
Definitely. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly think perfectly in English.
It's more like training a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes.
That's a great comparison. At first, it feels difficult. Then it becomes easier. And eventually, it starts feeling natural.
Let's imagine a learner sees a dog while walking outside.
Okay.
A beginner might think, dog. What is dog in my language?
Right.
But over time, the learner starts connecting the English word directly to the image of the dog. No translation needed.
That's exactly how the process works. And the same thing can happen with phrases and complete sentences.
Which is encouraging, because it means thinking in English isn't some special talent.
It's simply a habit that develops through practice.
And in the next part, we're going to talk about some practical exercises that listeners can start using today.
Simple exercises.
No complicated study plans.
Just small habits that can help train your brain to think in English more naturally. All right, let's move on to something practical. If a listener is thinking, okay, I understand the problem, but how do I actually start thinking in English? Where should they begin?
I think the best place to start is with very simple observations.
What do you mean by that?
Well, many learners think they need to discuss complicated topics in English, but that's not necessary. You can start by describing what's around you right now.
That's a great exercise. For example, if I'm sitting in my office, I can look around and think, there is a desk in front of me. My laptop is open. I have a cup of coffee next to me. Simple sentences.
Exactly. And the beauty of that exercise is that you don't need a conversation partner. You can do it anywhere, at home, at work, while traveling.
I like that because it removes the pressure. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're simply training your brain to use English.
That's the key. Keep it simple. Many learners make the mistake of trying to think about advanced topics immediately.
And then they get frustrated.
Exactly. If your brain is constantly searching for difficult vocabulary, you'll probably switch back to your native language.
So start small.
Very small. In fact, I often tell learners to think like a child learning a language.
That's interesting.
A child doesn't start with complicated opinions about politics or economics. A child starts with simple things. This is a chair. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I want water.
That's such good advice. Because simple English is still English.
Absolutely. And simple English builds confidence.
Another exercise I really like is talking to yourself.
Some people might think that's a little strange.
Maybe, but it's incredibly effective.
I agree. And honestly, everyone talks to themselves sometimes.
That's true. The difference is that we're suggesting doing it in English.
Exactly. For example, while making breakfast, you could say, I'm making coffee. I'm cutting some fruit. I need to leave the house in 30 minutes.
You're turning everyday activities into speaking practice.
And because those activities happen every day, you're creating a daily English habit without adding extra work to your schedule.
I love that idea. Because one of the biggest problems learners face is consistency.
Definitely. People often think they need an hour of study time every day. But even a few minutes of thinking in English can help.
Let's talk about another exercise. This is one of my favorites.
Which one?
Narrating your day.
Ah, that's a good one.
Imagine you're walking to work or school. You can describe what's happening around you. The weather is nice today. There's a lot of traffic. I think it's going to rain later.
That's great because you're using real English in a real situation.
Exactly. And you're not memorizing random sentences from a textbook. You're creating your own thoughts.
Which is much closer to what happens in actual conversations.
That's an important point. Because the goal isn't just learning English. The goal is using English.
Very true. And I think one of the biggest breakthroughs for learners happens when they stop translating every thought and start creating thoughts directly in English.
It doesn't happen overnight.
No, but it does happen, little by little, day by day.
And the more often you do it, the more natural it starts to feel.
Exactly. Your brain slowly becomes comfortable using English without needing that extra translation step.
And that's when conversations start becoming easier.
In the next part, let's talk about something that can make this process even faster.
Thinking in sentences instead of individual words.
That's a game changer for many learners.
So let's talk about something that I think can make a huge difference for English learners. Instead of thinking in individual words, try thinking in complete sentences.
That's such a powerful idea. Because I think many learners focus too much on single words. They spend a lot of time memorizing vocabulary lists.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Vocabulary is important.
Of course. But knowing a word and knowing how to use a word are two different things.
Exactly. Let's take a simple word like busy. A learner might know what it means, but in a real conversation, people don't usually just say busy. They say things like, I'm really busy today. I've been busy all week. Sorry, I'm busy right now.
That's why learning words inside sentences is so useful. You're learning how English is actually used.
And it also helps your brain think faster, because instead of building a sentence word by word, you're recalling a complete phrase.
That's a great point. Think about how native speakers talk. They're not creating every sentence from scratch. They use patterns and expressions they've heard thousands of times.
Exactly. And learners can do the same thing.
For example, instead of memorizing the word hungry, you could practice, I'm hungry. I'm getting hungry. I'm not very hungry.
And suddenly you're learning vocabulary, grammar, and sentence structure at the same time.
Which is much more efficient.
I think this is one reason podcasts are so useful.
Absolutely. When you listen to natural conversations, you're hearing complete thoughts. You're hearing how people connect ideas. You're hearing phrases that people actually use in daily life.
That's true. And one exercise I love is collecting useful sentences.
Not just individual words.
Exactly. Let's say you're listening to a podcast and you hear, "That makes sense."
That's a phrase people use all the time.
Right. Instead of only learning the meaning, try using it. Repeat it. Say it out loud. Use it during your next conversation.
That's how phrases become part of your active vocabulary.
And active vocabulary is what really matters when speaking.
Definitely. I think many learners have a huge passive vocabulary.
Meaning they recognize words when reading or listening.
Exactly. But when it's time to speak, those words don't appear.
That's a very common problem.
And learning phrases can help bridge that gap.
Another thing I've noticed is that learners often try to create very complicated sentences.
That's true. Sometimes people think complicated English sounds more impressive.
When in reality, simple English is often better.
Much better. In fact, many fluent speakers use simple sentences every day.
That's such an important lesson. You don't need complicated vocabulary to sound natural. You need clear communication.
Exactly. A simple sentence that you can say confidently is often more effective than a complicated sentence that makes you nervous.
I completely agree. And I think this takes a lot of pressure off learners.
It does, because now the goal isn't to sound perfect. The goal is to express your thoughts clearly.
And when you start thinking in phrases and sentences instead of individual words, that becomes much easier.
Definitely. And speaking of daily habits, I think there's another important question. How much practice do learners actually need each day?
That's a great question, because many people think they need hours of study every day.
But the answer might surprise them.
Let's talk about that next. So, let's answer a question that many learners ask. How much practice do you actually need each day to start thinking in English?
I think a lot of people are expecting a very large number.
Probably.
They imagine we're going to say 2 hours a day, or 3 hours, or maybe even more.
But honestly, I don't think that's necessary for most people.
Neither do I. In fact, I think consistency is much more important than the number of hours.
That's exactly how I feel. Because, let's be honest, most people have busy lives. They have jobs, families, studies, responsibilities.
And if a study plan feels impossible, people usually quit after a few days.
That's true. I think one of the biggest mistakes learners make is creating a plan that's too ambitious.
Like deciding they're going to study English for 3 hours every single day.
Exactly. It sounds great on Monday.
And by Thursday, they're exhausted.
That's often what happens.
I think it's much better to create a habit that's realistic, something you can continue for months instead of days.
Absolutely. 5 or 10 minutes of thinking in English every day can be surprisingly powerful.
Especially because it adds up over time.
Right. Let's do a simple calculation. If you spend 10 minutes a day thinking in English, that's over an hour every week.
And more than 60 hours in a year.
That's a lot of practice.
It really is. And the best part is that you don't need to find extra time.
That's one of my favorite things about this method. You can practice while doing things you're already doing.
Exactly. While driving, while walking, while cooking, while shopping, while waiting in line.
Those small moments are often ignored, but they can become valuable practice opportunities.
I think learners sometimes imagine that English practice only happens when you're sitting at a desk with a textbook.
That's a very common belief.
But language is part of everyday life. So practice can be part of everyday life too.
Let's imagine someone is making breakfast.
Okay.
Instead of scrolling through their phone, they could spend a few minutes describing what they're doing in English.
I'm making coffee. I'm making eggs. I need to leave for work soon.
Exactly. Simple thoughts, simple sentences, but they're building the habit.
And habits are powerful.
Very powerful. Because eventually you stop forcing yourself to think in English. You start doing it naturally.
That's the goal. Not perfection. Not memorizing thousands of words. Just becoming comfortable using English in your daily life.
Another thing I've noticed is that learners often underestimate small improvements.
That's true. People want dramatic results.
But language learning usually doesn't work that way.
Most progress is gradual. You don't notice it day by day.
But after a few months, you suddenly realize conversations feel easier.
Or you realize you're translating less.
Or you're finding words faster.
Those are signs of real progress.
Definitely. And that's why consistency matters so much.
Small actions, repeated regularly.
That's true for fitness.
It's true for learning a musical instrument.
And it's definitely true for learning English.
I completely agree.
Now, before we finish today's episode, I'd like to share one final mindset that can completely change how learners approach English.
I think this might be the most important part of the entire conversation.
I think so too. Before we finish today's episode, I want to share one final idea. And honestly, I think this might be the most important lesson of all.
I was wondering what your final lesson would be.
Well, here it is. Stop trying to translate perfectly. Start trying to communicate.
That's powerful.
Because many learners spend so much energy searching for the perfect word, the perfect sentence, or the perfect grammar structure. And while they're doing that, the conversation keeps moving.
That's true. Sometimes a simple sentence is all you need.
Exactly. Communication is about sharing ideas. It's not about proving that your English is perfect.
I think that's something many learners need to hear.
Because people often judge themselves very harshly.
Definitely. They focus on every mistake, every forgotten word, every awkward pause.
But they forget about all the things they did well.
That's right. Maybe you successfully expressed an idea. Maybe you understood a conversation. Maybe you spoke for 5 minutes longer than you could last month. Those are real achievements.
And those small achievements add up.
They really do.
I think learning to think in English is a long-term process. It's not something that happens in one day or 1 week.
Absolutely. It's a habit. And like any habit, it becomes stronger the more you practice it.
So, if you're listening today, don't worry if you still translate sometimes.
That's completely normal.
Don't worry if you forget words.
That's normal too.
And don't worry if speaking still feels difficult.
Because every English learner experiences those challenges.
The important thing is to keep going.
Keep practicing.
Keep listening.
Keep speaking.
And keep thinking in English whenever you can.
All right, everyone. Before we go, we'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's question. What is your biggest challenge when speaking English?
Is it translating in your head?
Forgetting words?
Fear of making mistakes?
Or lack of confidence?
Write your answer in the comments using English. Even one sentence is great practice.
We'd love to read your answers.
All right, everyone. That brings us to the end of today's episode of the Liza English Podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation and learned some useful ideas that can help you think in English more naturally.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.
And turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode.
We upload new English podcast episodes every day to help you improve your English speaking, listening, vocabulary, and confidence.
Thank you so much for listening.
Keep practicing, keep speaking, and keep thinking in English.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.